The worst part of Payday for Jack is that it never really feels like payday anymore. It used to. There was a time when the notification from his bank meant something. It meant the week had turned a corner. It meant the hours he had worked, the early starts, the late finishes, the traffic, the sore back, the meals eaten too quickly in the car had finally become money. For a few seconds, at least, the number in his account looked alive again, and there was a small private feeling of relief that maybe, just maybe, this time he could get ahead of the month before the month got ahead of him. But now, when Jack's pay arrives, it does not feel like fresh money. It feels like money passing through him before he has even made coffee, before the morning light has properly reached the kitchen bench, before he has had one clean moment to believe the paycheck belongs to him. The withdrawals begin. Rent takes its share. The phone company takes its share. The electricity bill takes its share. A grocery payment from last week takes its share. And then, almost casually, hidden among the ordinary transactions of modern life, another deduction appears. A wage advance repayment. Money Jack had already spent before he was paid. Money that was technically his because he had already worked the hours, but not yet his in the way that matters when the card machine is waiting, the petrol tank is empty, and the fridge at home has started to look like a problem. By the time Jack puts his phone down, Payday has not rescued him. It has settled a debt with his past self. And that is where this story begins, not in a lone office, not in a casino, not in some obvious place where bad financial decisions are supposed to happen, but in a normal kitchen, on a normal morning, with a working man looking at a paycheck that has arrived already wounded. The strange thing about wage advance apps is that they do not look like debt from the outside, because the promise sounds almost impossible to disagree with. If you have already worked the shift, if the company has already received your labor, if the hours have already been taken from your life and turned into value for someone else, then why should your money sit locked away until payroll decides to release it? Why should a person who earned money on Monday have to wait until Friday to use it? Especially when rent, petrol, groceries, medicine, school expenses, and every other demand of ordinary life refuse to wait with him. That is the sentence these apps are built around. It is your money. You earned it. So why shouldn't you have it now? And at first, to Jack, that does not sound dangerous. It sounds fair, because he is not trying to buy a boat. He is not gambling. He is not ordering champagne on a credit card he knows he cannot pay off. He is standing beside his car on a Thursday evening, staring at a tire that has gone soft for the third time in a week, knowing that if the tire gives out completely, he cannot get to work, and if he cannot get to work, the paycheck he is waiting for becomes even more fragile than it already is. The repair shop gives him a number that is not huge in the way rich people understand huge, but is huge in the way a number becomes huge when it arrives 3 days before payday and there is no spare money behind it. Jack sits in the car park with the quote on the passenger seat, doing the kind of maths that has no winning answer. If he pays for the tire, groceries become a problem. If he does not pay for the tire, work becomes a problem. If he calls someone for help, pride becomes a problem. And then he remembers the app his coworker mentioned during a lunch break, the one that lets you access wages you have already earned, the one that is not supposed to be a loan, not really, because the money is already yours. So he downloads it. He connects what it asks him to connect. The screen calculates an amount he can access, a little slice of pay that has not technically arrived yet, but has already been earned, and the whole thing feels oddly calm. There is no stern warning, no heavy contract, no moment where Jack feels like he has crossed some major financial line. The app speaks in soft language: access, flexibility, control, earned wages. It does not say you are desperate. It says you are being practical. A few taps later, the money appears. The tire gets fixed. Jack drives home. And that should be the end of the story. But it is not, because the most dangerous financial products do not always hurt you the first time you use them. Sometimes they do something much more powerful. They work. That first success changes the way Jack sees the app. It is no longer some strange thing on the edge of his life. It is proof that a problem can be made to disappear quickly, privately, without anyone needing to know how close the week came to falling apart. And once a product has rescued you once, it earns a little room in your mind, not as debt, not as danger, as an option. And options have a way of becoming habits when life keeps applying pressure. A few weeks later, the pressure returns, because pressure always returns. Groceries cost more than they did last month, even though the trolley is not any fuller. His daughter comes home with a school note about a payment due by Friday. The electricity bill arrives with the quiet confidence of something that does not care what else has arrived before it. Jack does not feel reckless when he opens the app again. He feels tired. He feels cornered. He feels like he is using a tool exactly the way the tool was designed to be used. This is how the hinge closes. Not with a disaster, with a reasonable decision. One advance becomes two. Two becomes a pattern. And the pattern is easy to defend, because every use has a reason attached to it. Petrol is a reason. Groceries are a reason. School is a reason. Medicine is a reason. Rent is a reason. The strange horror of this kind of debt is that it does not need Jack to be irresponsible. It only needs his life to be expensive in a way his paycheck cannot quite keep up with. To understand why this trap works, you have to understand the gap it leaves inside. Most workers earn money continuously, but receive it in lumps. They give an hour of labor, and then another, and then another, but the money does not come back to them in the same steady rhythm. It builds up somewhere else, invisible and unreachable, until the official day it is allowed to arrive. Real life, however, does not operate on payroll logic. The petrol light does not wait for Friday. The landlord does not wait for Friday. The dentist does not wait for Friday. A child getting sick does not wait for Friday. A car tire does not wait for Friday. The entire modern household is a machine that asks for money in real time, while wages often arrive days or weeks after the need. Wage advance apps look at that mismatch and offer themselves as the bridge. And a bridge is hard to hate when you are standing over a hole. But here is the part that gets lost inside the clean design and friendly wording. The bridge does not create money. It only changes the order in which money arrives. It reaches into the future, takes a piece of the next paycheck, and brings it back to today. Today becomes easier. Tomorrow becomes smaller. And if tomorrow was already going to be tight, the smaller paycheck does not feel like a neutral adjustment. It feels like the beginning of the next emergency. That is exactly what happens to Jack. The first advance fixes the tire, but payday arrives with a piece missing. The missing piece makes the next week tighter, so he takes another advance for groceries. That advance makes the following payday smaller, so when a bill lands early, he takes another. The app is no longer solving one problem. It is moving the same problem forward, like someone kicking a can down a road that somehow keeps getting steeper. From the outside, people like to imagine financial traps as one big bad decision, a reckless loan, a ridiculous purchase, a person ignoring obvious danger signs because they wanted something they could not afford. But the trap Jack falls into is quieter than that. It is built out of decisions that make complete sense in the moment. Fix the tire so you can get to work. Buy the groceries so your family can eat. Pay the bill so the lights stay on. Cover the school expense so your child does not miss out. Each choice alone is defensible. Together, they become a loop. And the loop is the real product. Because once Jack has borrowed from next payday arrives weaker, and when the weaker payday cannot carry the next week, the app is already waiting with the same solution it offered before. It does not have to convince him from the beginning. It only has to remind him that there is a way to make the pressure stop for now. Not forever, not even for long, but for now. And for people living close to zero, for now can be an incredibly powerful thing. That is what wage advance apps really sell, not money. Relief. They sell the feeling of breathing again when the week has pressed a hand over your mouth. They sell the private dignity of handling a problem without calling family, without asking the boss, without explaining yourself to a lender who looks at you like you have already failed. They sell a version of borrowing that does not feel like borrowing, because the person you are borrowing from seems to be your own future self, but the future self still has to live. And when Jack's future self finally arrives, he is not richer, calmer, or magically better prepared. He is the same man, in the same kitchen, with the same bills, looking at a paycheck that has been reduced by decisions he made when he was only trying to survive the week before. That is the emotional cruelty of the product. It turns the future into a storage room for pain. Every time today becomes too heavy, Jack puts a little of the weight into tomorrow, and tomorrow, when it becomes today, is expected to carry it. For a while, he tells himself he is still in control. He uses the app only when he has to, and technically that is true. But the definition of has to begins to change. At first, has to means an emergency, then it means a bill, then it means a tight week, then it means avoiding the embarrassment of a declined card, then it means not having to choose between petrol and groceries. The emergency does not disappear. It spreads out until it becomes the shape of normal life. That is when the app has done something more powerful than lend him money. It has trained him. It has trained him to see wages not as something that arrives on payday, but as something that can always be put forward if the pressure gets bad enough. It has trained him to treat the next paycheck as a backup account. It has trained him to solve shortage by moving it into a future that is already short. And once that mental shift happens, the fee attached to each advance is only part of the cost. The deeper cost is that payday itself starts to lose its meaning. The old payday loan industry understood this pattern, but it looked ugly enough that people could recognize it from a distance. It carried a stigma, fashion heavy, desperate timing, a lender waiting at the edge of someone's bad week. Wage advance apps arrive with a cleaner face and a better story. They do not say borrow against your next pay. They say access what you have earned. They do not say we profit from your shortage. They say we help you manage your cash flow. The old version sounded like desperation. The new version sounds like empowerment, and that is what makes it harder to see clearly, because part of the argument is true. Workers are often paid in a way that does not match the reality of their expenses. A person may genuinely need access to money they have already earned before payroll releases it. In a real emergency, a wage advance can be cheaper than an overdraft, cheaper than a payday loan, cheaper than missing a bill and being hit with penalties. Some people use these apps once, carefully, and move on without harm. That matters. A tool can be useful and dangerous at the same time. But the danger begins when the tool designed for emergencies becomes part of the budget. Because if Jack uses it once, the app is a bridge. If he uses it every pay cycle, the bridge has become the road. And once that happens, the company behind the bridge has a very good reason to hope the river never dries up. That is the unsettling part of the business. Wage advance apps do not need to create the cost of living pressure surrounding Jack. Rent does that. Groceries do that. Food does that. Low savings do that. Unstable hours do that. The economy pushes people toward the edge, and the app waits at exactly the point where falling starts to feel possible. It does not have to be loud. It does not have to be cruel. It only has to be available at the perfect moment. In the repair shop car park, at the supermarket checkout, in the pharmacy line, on the couch at midnight, after Jack has checked his bank balance for the 4th time and done the same calculation in 3 different ways, hoping one version of the maths will hurt less than the others. At that moment, the app does not feel like a financial product. It feels like a door, but a door that leads back to the same room is not really an escape. It is a loop with better lighting, and the loop becomes harder to escape because Jack is not only dealing with one product anymore. Almost nobody is. Modern financial pressure does not arrive as one giant monster at the door. It arrives as a swarm of small, polite demands: a wage advance repayment, a buy now, pay later installment, a card minimum, a bill split into smaller pieces, a subscription that renews quietly, an insurance payment, a late fee, a service fee. Each one looks survivable on its own. Each one can be explained. Each one is small enough to ignore until they all arrive together. Then payday stops being a beginning. It becomes a corridor that everyone else walks through first. The landlord gets paid, the lender gets paid, the app gets paid, the utility company gets paid, the phone company gets paid, the supermarket gets paid, the petrol station gets paid. By the time Jack reaches for what remains, he is not really receiving a wage in the old sense. He is collecting the leftover amount after a quiet auction has already taken place inside his bank account. And the strangest thing is how normal he still looks. He still goes to work, he still packs lunches, he still answers messages, he still pays for things most of the time, he still jokes with coworkers and tells people he is doing fine. Because there is no easy way to explain that you are not broke in the dramatic sense, but your money is always arriving too late, leaving too quickly, and shrinking before you can use it. Financial stress at this level is often invisible because the person carrying it is still functioning. They are not collapsing, they are just permanently bracing. That invisibility is useful. It lets the product remain a private convenience instead of becoming a public warning light. And that is why consumer advocates have started paying attention. Not because every user is doomed, and not because every advance is harmful, but because a product aimed at people under financial pressure can become most profitable when the pressure does not end. If the fee is small, the user may not feel it immediately. If repayment is automatic, the company gets paid before the worker has fully experienced the shortage it creates. If the language is soft enough, borrowing does not feel like borrowing. And if the next paycheck is small enough after repayment, the user may return before they have had time to decide whether the last advance really helped or simply moved the problem forward. This is the heart of it. Wage advance does not always trap people by taking a huge amount at once. It traps them by changing their relationship with time. It makes tomorrow spendable. Then tomorrow arrives with less. So the day after tomorrow becomes spendable too. And bit by bit, Jack's future stops being a place he is moving toward and becomes a place he keeps withdrawing from. That is a strange way to live, because it means work no longer produces the same emotional reward it once did. Jack is still earning, but the earnings feel pre-owned. He is still waiting for payday, but payday no longer feels like something coming to save him. It feels like something he has already promised away. The finish line keeps moving, not because he stopped running, but because the race now begins before he gets there. This is why the story is bigger than one app, or one worker, or one bad week. A society where people routinely need early access to wages is not simply discovering a clever financial convenience. It is revealing that millions of paychecks are no longer strong enough to reach the next paycheck without help. That is not just a timing problem. That is an income problem, wearing the costume of a timing problem. And the costume matters because timing problems can be solved with apps, while income problems ask much more uncomfortable questions. Questions about wages, rent, prices, savings, insecure work, the cost of raising children, the cost of getting sick, the cost of keeping a car on the road so you can keep earning the money you already do not have. The app does not answer those questions. It makes them quieter for a few days. And maybe in an emergency, quieter is exactly what someone needs. If the alternative is missing rent, losing transport, or being hit by a worse fee, a wage advance can be the least bad option on the table. That deserves fairness. People under pressure choose from the options available to them, not from the options society wishes they had. But when the least bad option becomes routine, something has gone badly wrong. Jack does not have a dramatic ending. That is what makes the story feel real. There is no single moment where everything falls apart, no final letter in the mail, no cinematic collapse where the music swells and the lesson becomes obvious. There is only another payday, another set of deductions, another calculation, another promise to himself that this cycle will be the last one. Next time there will be no tire. Next time the groceries will be cheaper. Next time the bill will not come early. Next time the paycheck will be enough. But next time is still life. And life is very good at arriving with a receipt. So Jack keeps working, keeps earning, keeps waiting for money that feels smaller every time it arrives, while the app remains on his phone like a quiet little doorway into the future. It does not shout, it does not threaten, it simply waits for the next bad week, knowing that bad weeks are not rare anymore, they are the rhythm. That is the real question, hiding inside the friendly promise of early pay. Is this a smarter, kinder, more flexible way to let workers access money they have genuinely earned? Or is it a beautifully designed way to avoid noticing, for just a little while longer, that the paycheck itself no longer stretches far enough? For Jack and for millions of workers like him, that question is not theoretical. It is not a debate on a news panel. It is not a policy document. It is the petrol light on the dashboard. It is the school note on the kitchen bench. It is the repair bill folded in the glove box. It is the bank balance checked at midnight. It is the strange, sinking feeling of watching payday arrive already spoken for. Because the most dangerous part of a wage advance app is not simply that it gives people money before payday. It is that it can teach them to survive by making every future payday smaller. And once payday becomes something you owe money to before it even arrives, it stops being the day you catch up. It becomes the day the next chase begins.